My business partner tried to frame me for embezzlement, so I planted evidence that she was stealing from clients. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs earlier, but honestly, when you're building something from the ground up with someone you trust, you tend to overlook the red flags. We had been working together for 3 years, starting our consulting firm in a cramped office above a coffee shop in downtown Portland. The smell of roasted beans became so familiar that I could tell what blend they were making just by walking up the stairs. Our partnership seemed perfect at first because we complemented each other so well. I handled the technical side of our operations, while she managed client relationships and finances. We split everything 50-50, from profits to late-night pizza orders when we were burning the midnight oil preparing presentations. Those early days felt magical, like we were building something meaningful together. The first hint that something was wrong came during our second year, when I noticed discrepancies in our client billing. Small things at first, a few $100s here and there, that didn't match what I remembered discussing with clients. When I brought it up, she always had explanations ready. Extra consultation fees, emergency charges, administrative costs that I must have forgotten about. Her explanations were so detailed and confident that I questioned my own memory. I started keeping my own records after that, writing down every client interaction, every quoted price, every agreed-upon service. It became almost obsessive, but something deep in my gut told me to document everything. My grandmother always said that when your instincts start whispering, you better start listening, and those whispers were getting louder every day. The breaking point came 6 months later when our biggest client called me directly about a billing dispute. They had been charged for services we never provided, and the amount was substantial enough to make my stomach drop. When I confronted my partner about it, she became defensive and started turning the conversation back on me. She questioned my memory, my attention to detail, even my commitment to our partnership. That night, I went through every single financial document we had, spreading them across my kitchen table like puzzle pieces. The pattern became clear once I started looking for it. Over the past 18 months, there had been systematic overcharging, mysterious fees, and services billed that were never rendered. The total amount was staggering, easily enough to destroy our reputation and land us both in serious legal trouble. I realized she had been planning something when she started asking strange questions about my personal finances. Did I have gambling debts? Was I struggling with money? Had I ever borrowed against my credit cards? These questions seemed innocent enough at the time, just friendly concern from a business partner, but now they felt like reconnaissance. The trap was set beautifully, I have to admit. One Tuesday morning, I arrived at the office to find her already there with two men in suits. She introduced them as investigators from the state attorney's office, and they wanted to discuss some irregularities in our financial records. My blood ran cold as she stood there looking concerned and cooperative while they explained the allegations against me. According to their investigation, I had been embezzling client funds for over a year. They had detailed records, bank statements, and even testimony from clients who claimed I had personally handled their billing issues. The evidence was overwhelming and damning, and I could see my entire life crumbling as they spoke. My partner played her part perfectly, expressing shock and disappointment while offering to cooperate fully with their investigation. But here's where she made her critical mistake. In her eagerness to make the frame-up convincing, she had included details about my supposed embezzlement methods that only someone with intimate knowledge of our financial systems would know. She described specific software vulnerabilities and accounting tricks that I had never even heard of, let alone used. It was like she had studied forensic accounting just to make her story more believable. That afternoon, while she was out celebrating what she probably thought was her victory, I did some digging of my own. I discovered that she had been meeting regularly with a forensic accountant for months, supposedly to improve our financial oversight. The timing aligned perfectly with when the irregularities in our billing had started becoming more sophisticated and harder to detect. I spent the next week going through every piece of documentation I could find, but this time I was looking for evidence of her activities rather than trying to defend myself. What I found was a masterclass in financial manipulation that went far beyond simple embezzlement. She had been creating fake vendor accounts, billing clients for services from companies that didn't exist, and routing those payments through a complex network of shell corporations. The most damning evidence came from her own computer, which she had left logged in during one of her longer lunch breaks. I found detailed spreadsheets tracking her various schemes, complete with projected timelines for framing me and taking over the business entirely. There were even notes about which of our clients she planned to keep and which ones she would let go after I was out of the picture. What struck me most was how methodical and emotionless her planning had been. She had calculated exactly how much she could steal before suspicion would fall on someone, and she had chosen me as the perfect scapegoat. My technical background made me seem capable of sophisticated financial fraud, and my generally quiet demeanor meant I was less likely to fight back aggressively. But she had underestimated how much I had learned about business operations during our partnership. I understood our systems well enough to plant evidence of her activities in places where investigators would eventually find it. I modified her fake vendor records to include her personal information, created email trails showing her communications with non-existent companies, and even planted evidence of her accessing client accounts after hours. The beauty of my plan was that I didn't have to create fake evidence, I just had to make her real crimes more visible. Every piece of fabricated documentation I placed in her files was based on actual fraud she had committed. I was simply ensuring that the truth would come to light during any thorough investigation. I also started reaching out to our clients directly, not to accuse anyone of anything, but to verify billing records and service agreements. These conversations revealed that several clients had been questioning charges for months, but had been told that I was handling their accounts personally. She had been using my name and reputation to legitimize her fraudulent billing while setting me up to take the fall. The confrontation with the investigators became a chess match where I had to prove my innocence while simultaneously exposing her guilt. I presented my own documentation showing the timeline of suspicious activities, all of which began after she had started meeting with the forensic accountant. I demonstrated how the supposed evidence against me contained information that only someone with her level of financial access could have known. But the real turning point came when I revealed the planted evidence in her files. During a search of our office systems, investigators found the modified vendor records with her personal information, the email trails showing her communications with fake companies, and evidence of her accessing client accounts during times when I could prove I was elsewhere. The web of lies she had constructed began unraveling faster than she could explain it away. Her reaction when confronted with this evidence was both satisfying and terrifying. The mask of concerned partnership fell away completely, and I saw the calculating coldness that had been hidden beneath our years of supposed friendship. She tried to claim that I had planted the evidence, but the timestamps and system logs told a different story. She had been sloppy in her confidence, leaving digital footprints that clearly showed her activities. The legal proceedings that followed were brutal but necessary. She was charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy, while the charges against me were dropped entirely. Our clients, once they understood what had really happened, were surprisingly supportive. Many of them had suspected something was wrong, but hadn't known how to address their concerns without seeming accusatory. The business didn't survive the scandal, which was heartbreaking after all the work we had put into building it. But I learned valuable lessons about trust, documentation, and the importance of following your instincts when something feels wrong. The experience taught me that people can hide their true nature for years, and that sometimes the person you trust most is the one planning your downfall. Recovery from betrayal like this takes time, and there were months when I questioned every relationship and business decision I had ever made. The paranoia was exhausting, but it also made me more careful and observant. I started a new venture eventually, but this time I kept much tighter control over all aspects of the operation and never again gave anyone complete access to financial systems. What bothers me most about the whole experience isn't the money or even the legal troubles, but the realization that someone I considered a friend had been planning my destruction for months. She had sat across from me during countless meetings, shared meals, celebrated successes, and commiserated over failures, all while systematically setting me up to take the fall for her crimes. The investigation revealed that she had been planning this exit strategy almost from the beginning of our partnership. She had never intended for our business to be a true collaboration, but had seen it as a vehicle for her own enrichment and a way to build credibility before moving on to bigger opportunities. I was never a partner in her mind, just a useful tool to be discarded when convenient. Looking back, I can see how she had been testing my reactions to small discrepancies for months, gauging how much I would question and how easily I could be manipulated. She had been studying my personality and business habits the same way a predator studies its prey, looking for weaknesses and blind spots that could be exploited. The most chilling part of her plan was how she had been building relationships with our clients, specifically, to undermine my credibility. She had been subtle about it, never directly criticizing me, but always positioning herself as the more reliable and trustworthy partner. She had been laying the groundwork for my downfall, while I was focused on growing the business we supposedly shared. Her downfall came not from any brilliant detective work on my part, but from her own arrogance and overconfidence. She had become so convinced of her own cleverness that she had stopped being careful about covering her tracks. The evidence I planted simply highlighted patterns that were already there, making it impossible for investigators to ignore what she had been doing. The legal resolution brought some satisfaction, but it couldn't undo the damage to my reputation and confidence. Even though I was cleared of all charges, some people in our industry still associated me with the scandal. Building a new professional network required patience and persistence, and I had to prove myself all over again to people who had heard only fragments of the story. The experience also changed how I approach business relationships and partnerships. I now insist on complete transparency in all financial matters, maintain independent records of all transactions, and never give anyone else exclusive control over any aspect of operations. These precautions might seem excessive, but they provide peace of mind that I never had before. What I learned about human nature during this ordeal was both disturbing and enlightening. People are capable of maintaining elaborate deceptions for years, and they can compartmentalize their actions in ways that allow them to sleep peacefully while destroying others. The woman who had been my partner and friend was also capable of calculated betrayal on a scale that still amazes me. The most important lesson was about trusting my instincts and acting on them sooner rather than later. The warning signs had been there for months, but I had dismissed them because I wanted to believe in our partnership. In business, as in life, when something feels wrong, it usually is wrong, and investigating those feelings is better than ignoring them. Today, I run a successful consulting practice that I built from scratch after the scandal. It's smaller than what we had before, but it's entirely mine, and I know exactly where every dollar comes from and goes. The experience taught me that sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best opportunities, and that surviving something like this makes you stronger and more resilient than you ever imagined possible. The woman who tried to frame me eventually served 2 years in prison and paid substantial restitution to our former clients. She lost her professional license and reputation, and last I heard, she was working in a completely different field under a different name. Justice was served, but the personal cost to both of us was enormous, and I sometimes wonder if there was a different path we could have taken. But dwelling on what ifs doesn't change the past, and I'm grateful that the truth came to light before permanent damage was done to my life and career. The experience taught me that sometimes you have to fight dirty to survive, and that protecting yourself isn't just about being honest. It's about being smart, strategic, and willing to take action when necessary.